Well, he has a very clear view of how you get there, right? That this is the whole, art of the deal, start very tough, push very hard. You're right. He doesn't care about means. If you mean he doesn't care about principles, norms, um, traditions, standards, diplomacy. He has a very different view of how you get to a result, and it's about leverage, disruption, very difficult tactics that really move the needle, but they come at a price, and they come at a price of, trust, confidence, stability, predictability, things that are important to markets, things that are important to alliances, the health of those alliances. So that the cost is, not perhaps something that the president is recognizing right now, but the cost is undoubtedly there.
7:35 Times Radio Breakfast with Kate McCann and Stig Abel. It won't surprise you that Donald Trump broke the record for the longest presidential speech to Congress since people started timing these things. I had a look at a website that had the number of words Kate used in previous ones. In the 19th century, the end of the 19th century, they really unbuckled and let themselves go. There was one, I think it was James Polk and Grover Cleveland. They both had speeches that had more than 25,000 words.
What?
Which is like 3.5 hours of reading out. But when you start recording them, which is really when LBJ came in the 60s, this was the longest ever. It was 1 hour and 43 minutes. So it covered an awful lot from Donald Trump. It was mostly focused on domestic matters, immigration, crime, cutting spending. But of course, here and in the rest of Europe, we were waiting for his comments about Ukraine. As we've been telling you, he said he appreciated the letter that President Zelensky had written to him. But this was a speech about ambition, a bit about America being great, and that means America broadening its horizons.
We are going to create the highest quality of life, build the safest and wealthiest and healthiest and most vital communities anywhere in the world. We are going to conquer the vast frontiers of science, and we're going to lead humanity into space and plant the American flag on the planet Mars and even far beyond.
Not just Mars, it's going further than Mars.
Where?
We've had the astronomer royal on this programme say, how Musk said we'll be able to get to Mars? And he's like, no, we won't. Not anytime soon. But there's the ambition for you. He wants to go beyond Mars. It's a stepping stone. You go Greenland, then you go Mars, then you go beyond. Dr. Leslie Vinjimuri is Director of the US and America's Programme at Chatham House and Professor of International Relations at SOAS University of London. Leslie, morning to you.
Morning.
Thanks for having me. It's a great pleasure. Let's do foreign affairs, shall we? As ever, Trump seems to get what he wants when it comes to foreign affairs. Certainly around Ukraine, he gives Zelensky a kicking. Zelensky has to swallow humble pie and come back. And it feels like Trump is still very much controlling the conversation. And that speech was a sort of celebration of that.
It certainly was. I mean, I thought on Europe, on Ukraine, and on President Zelensky, that Trump was surprisingly mild. Largely because, as you say, he seems to have, gotten what he wants. He cuts, and makes that announcement that he's stopping aid to Ukraine. He has that letter from Zelensky, and I think he has a sense right now that he's got the sweet spot, which is that he's going to, he hopes, get the ceasefire that he wants. We all know that leaves more questions unanswered than it leaves answered. But in the speech, he even said at one point, good things were happening in Europe. He starts out criticizing Europe for buying, more Russian oil and gas than supporting Ukraine, but he says, but good things are happening there. So a president, you're right, who puts pressure on, uses it as leverage, aims to get what he wishes, but it's coming at a price. And I think I noticed that when he talked about tariffs, right? He said, he's clearly gotten the feedback. This is not going to be great. And for the farmers, it's going to be unsettling. And he was almost, pleading, as much as Donald Trump pleads with anybody, with folks to be patient on the disruptive impacts of the tariffs.
Is it true Europe spent more money on Russian oil than it did on supplying Ukraine? Because he said that a couple of times. We were about to speak to one of his former press secretaries later on. He makes the same claim again. It's a line that gets bandied about. Vance has said it recently. Do we know how true that is?
Yeah, look, on the truth question, the New York Times, just right in, the moments after the speech had, I think, 100 errors, mistruths, untruths, that they had already counted in his speech. It was littered with disinformation, and this is really dangerous terrain. Disinformation is a problem everywhere, but when it's coming from the president of the United States, it's quite a different thing. So on those facts, I mean, people are scrambling to fact check, but I suspect not true. And he puts no numbers, right? On this kind of thing, he puts no numbers. The one place where he really put firm numbers is when he was reading out those USAID projects to demonstrate to the American people, to justify basically the decision to cut foreign assistance. It was really a remarkable part of his speech, project after project, mocking, in a sense, the commitments that the U.S. had made.
I guess the point. I guess the point is, Leslie, and we had this conversation later with one of his colleagues, is that he cares about ends, not means, and means includes decency. Means includes sort of diplomatic norms, and means probably includes telling the truth or entirely relying on absolutely fact-checked things. I mean, some of the things he says will clearly be true, but he doesn't care about the road to get there. He just cares about the eventual destination.
Well, he has a very clear view of how you get there, right? That this is the whole, art of the deal, start very tough, push very hard. You're right. He doesn't care about means. If you mean he doesn't care about principles, norms, traditions, standards, diplomacy. He has a very different view of how you get to a result, and it's about leverage, disruption, very difficult tactics that really move the needle, but they come at a price, and they come at a price of, trust, confidence, stability, predictability, things that are important to markets, things that are important to alliances, the health of those alliances. So that the cost is, not perhaps something that the president is recognizing right now, but the cost is undoubtedly there. And on those changes, we don't know the extent to which they hold. The big bet are the tariffs, right? How much will those tariffs really move the needle, and how high will the price be to the American consumer, to the Canadian consumer, to the Mexican consumer? I mean, the list is very long.
Just before you go, the other thing that strikes me the more I listen to Donald Trump, and maybe this is an important factor when it comes to thinking about the war in Ukraine, is he regards there to be no moral difference between Zelensky and Putin. He regards them as equal combatants. He doesn't care where the war came from. He just cares that there is a war. So none of the colouring that we have in Europe when it comes to that conflict, which is clearly based on Putin illegally invaded, all of that stuff, is just completely omitted from his thinking. It is a war between two people who he regards more or less as the same. He's probably slightly more favourable to Putin than he is to Zelensky. But the point is, he doesn't regard there to be any moral charge within that war at all.
No, he wants the war over. He wants to reset America's relationship with Russia across a number of dimensions. And what you said is exactly right. Too often, we have the sense that he, if anything, favors Putin and Putin's motivations and justifications for that war over Zelensky. And that's been painfully clear over the last week, but even long before that.
And my one-word answer for you, just before you go, which is he going to get first? Which is America going to own first? Greenland, Canada, or Mars?
That is a tough question. I hate to say it, but I do think he's going to keep pushing on Greenland.
Really?
He made that.
Yeah, he made that very, very clear. I think that's probably right. Leslie, good to speak to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Leslie Vinjimuri, their director of the US and Americas program at Chatham House.